Hello there. Well, it's Sunday morning, which means we're here at the Pattaya City Expats Club at Tavern by the Sea, part of the Amari in North Pattaya on Beach Road. Now, every week they have interesting guest speakers. The gentleman today has been, informing people about a new mechanisms that came in about how to use different, forms of transactions of finances. This is one that's been around for a while. His name is Aaron Sawaku, sorry Aaron, and you're from Cryptosigma.
That's correct.
Cryptosigma, right. Now, today you're telling people about Bitcoin.
That's right.
Now, Bitcoin is something that we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot of stuff in the media, a lot of negativity on the media, which we can get into in a minute perhaps. It's something that I think that the layman thinks perhaps is used by financial institutions or companies who want to move around funds, if you like. Or notes. Okay, right, or notes. But actually, it's something that is applicable to the man on the street as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it's for. That's what Bitcoin is for. It is for the man on the street. Over the last few centuries, what's happened is the banking model has been centralized, and whoever controls the money supply has an inordinate amount of power. So Bitcoin is a way to democratize money, because money is incredibly undemocratic. So that's exactly who it's for. It's for the everyday person to be able to control their own funds and not have to use a central organization such as a bank.
Okay. So the banks probably aren't very happy about all this.
They're really not happy about it, and I think it's going to be a really, really tough road for developers and other entrepreneurs such as myself involved in the space in terms of bringing Bitcoin to the masses, or at least helping to bring it to the masses. The banks and the governments, this is something that disrupts their business model. It's something that undermines their monopoly, and I don't think they're going to go without a fight. I mean, they've said so. The CEO of JP Morgan Chase Bank a few months ago, I think 2 months ago, went in the media and said the Bitcoin entrepreneurs and developers are trying to eat our lunch, and we are not going to let them. So let's see.
For the common man, why should we be buying their lunch?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
One of the terms that I've seen is the peer-to-peer, and it reminded me of, how peer-to-peer downloading.
Correct,
and,
exactly.
and I thought, well, that's where the man on the street has basically said, well, I've got this stuff, I want to share it. And I don't think it's similar, but you can see why the record executives and the movie companies would be unhappy about that, because essentially, in a way, they've financed that. But this is the man in the street taking control.
This is the man on the street taking control now of money, of his own money, of his funds. And I think that's a really, really interesting point that you brought up, and it's one of my favorite points, actually, because when downloads first started happening, the record labels didn't pivot fast enough, and they turned around and they said, how do we destroy these guys? But at the end of the day, we're still downloading movies today. They weren't able to destroy it. The best thing that they could have done was they could have turned around and said, hey, this is something that we possibly can't beat because it's so decentralized. How do we embrace it? So we embrace it, and we say, you know what? We're going to take this technology and we're going to allow everybody to download as much content from our catalog as you want, but you've got to give us $25 a month. They would have made so much more money, and now what they're doing is 20 years later, they are scrambling, trying to make that exact business model work. And it should have been something they got on a long time ago. And Bitcoin is no different. It's peer-to-peer money, and without the involvement of a central organization. And I just sincerely hope that the banks and the governments look at it and embrace it, which I think they're starting to do. The Bank of England has, said this is interesting. This is a way for us possibly to reinvigorate our fintech sector. And they look at it and they take it and say, let's not try and fight this. Let's understand it and embrace it. Because ultimately, this kind of technology is like water. It's like a stream. If you put, some earth in front of it, it will find a way around. If you put a stone, it will find a way around. It's very fluid.
I think one of the apprehensions that people may have about something like this is that the fact that, in a sense, it's unregulated. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, at the moment, there is not much regulation pertaining to Bitcoin. There is some in terms of anti-money laundering regulations, consumer protection. We have this concept of regulation that has been built into us over a long time, and that's because we've always dealt with centralized networks. And the difference with Bitcoin is it's a decentralized network, and it actually, to a degree, regulates itself. It's very much like cash. You cannot control what somebody uses their cash for, in the same way you can't control what somebody uses their Bitcoin for. With a credit card, if somebody does something illegal with a credit card, then there's chargebacks. You can get that money back, but that's just the central organization giving you that money back or clawing that money back and making, voiding that transaction because they're controlling those transactions. Bitcoin's very different. It's really like cash, and the network is designed in such a way that it does actually regulate itself.
Well, regulation is one of those things that, in a sense, we became used to it. I mean, whatever it is, whether it's financial institutions or such like. But in reality, is it needed? Like in Thailand, there's not an MOT system for transport. Cars are on the street, and they seem to still manage, and sometimes accidents happen, of course. Right. But rather than having this police state that we have in the UK and such like, people just carry on and just get on with it. Yeah. So it's an interesting concept, I think, this whole regulation. Let's talk a little bit about the negative sides of it, or what people perceive are the negative sides. I did a little bit of research, and it was talking about the black market, and you mentioned things like money laundering, but then obviously the seedier side of things like drugs, whatever. But of course, people can use cash to buy to buy drugs.
Same thing. And we don't, people can use cash to buy drugs and buy weapons, and we don't turn around and say, well, because people are using US dollars to buy weapons and drugs, let's shut down the US dollar. No way.
Where do you think it's going to go in the next year? Because one of the things that you were alluding to, well, quite strongly, is that you think there's going to be an economic crash which will far supersede what happened in 2008.
Yeah, I think, we are, based on how devalued currency has become now because of excessive quantitative easing and money printing and just bad monetary policy. I think in 2015 or 2016, yes, there might be a pretty strong economic crash. And I think at that point, that is a point where people will look and say, what other options do we have? Because at the moment, a lot of people don't really want to have a conversation about Bitcoin because as far as they're concerned, the system we have right now works, and it works quite well. So by the time it stops working, perhaps people want to have a more in-depth conversation about Bitcoin. Whether that crash will come, I don't know, but certainly everything that's happening is alluding to it, and I sincerely hope that it doesn't, and I still think whether there's a crash or there isn't a crash, Bitcoin will find its way. So yeah.
So that means that perhaps for those who have money in the banks, which is sitting there doing very little, especially in today's climate, does that mean that that you think that Bitcoin would be a safer place for them to put their money, some of their money?
Okay, yeah, I think that everybody should have a really diverse set of investments. So to keep all your money in a monetary system, so cash, a US dollar or Thai baht or Sing dollar or Hong Kong dollar, whatever, is only going to mean over time your money devalues. So I think to buy gold, to buy silver is great. I think to buy Bitcoin is great. And you don't necessarily need to buy Bitcoin now because there's many places to spend it. But you need to buy it as some kind of insurance policy, perhaps. I mean, that's a really, really nice way to look at it. If you can buy it as an insurance policy and just say, hey, if I put $2,000 or $3,000 into Bitcoin, which costs $320 a coin right now, and the US dollar stops working in a year or 2 years, or perhaps doesn't stop working. I mean, probably the US dollar isn't ever going to really stop working, but say the value really, really drops, then your Bitcoin will appreciate in value as an alternative system like gold, because Bitcoin as an asset class can be very similar to gold. And then the price of your Bitcoins appreciates to, some of the predictions that have been bandied about are $5,000, $10,000 is what it can be in the future, some even higher. But I think it doesn't hurt to have insurance in other assets. So Bitcoin, gold, really interesting. I think people should look into that.
Okay. Well, you're mentioning gold, but Bitcoin isn't something tangible. It's used the analogy of a ledger, because that's what it is. It's a transaction. You can't actually have Bitcoin and hold it in your hand, can you?
No, you can't hold Bitcoin in your hand. And again, this is something that I think people have to adapt to a little bit, because we're always used to having something physical, whether it's paper money or gold or so on and so forth. But gold and paper money or any kind of commodity or asset class has two types of value. It's got premium value and it's got intrinsic value. So intrinsic value is something that gold has because people like to use it for jewelry and other things like that. So it has a physical value. But then the price of $1,200 for an ounce of gold, let's say, for example, is not $1,200 of intrinsic value. The intrinsic value is much, much less. What else is factored in there is the cost of making it, right? The cost of getting it out the ground, the cost of shaping it, the cost of shipping it, etc., etc. And also the fact that people are prepared to use it as a store of value, and the market has deemed this is what the price is. So all those other aspects make up the rest of its value, which is called premium value. So premium value is relative to what people are prepared to use it for, whether that's a store of value or a way to, make payments between each other. And Bitcoin is 100% premium value. And that's not really a big deal that it has no intrinsic value, because the intrinsic value of anything else is very, very small anyway. Paper money has no intrinsic value.
Okay. Now, someone asked the question, so they said, well, if I came into some money, he actually said playing a game of poker, but of course gambling's illegal here in Thailand, so nobody plays cards. If he won some money and said, right, I'm going to give this as a gift to my friend in the States or whatever he said, how does that work? How can he utilize Bitcoin and your company to do something like that? Is that viable?
Yeah, it's totally viable. So basically what he can do is he can take that cash and he can in an online exchange, whether that's Cryptosigma.com or it's another exchange, he can go and he can exchange that US dollar for Bitcoin, and then he can send that Bitcoin to his friend, who must also have a Bitcoin wallet on his smartphone or on his computer. When that person receives that Bitcoin, they can hold on to it, or they can again cash it out to any currency they want. It's completely their choice, and it's instant, so you don't have to wait 3 to 5 days for him to receive the money, and it will cost you probably 0.1% or less.
Okay. Who pays the cost? Is it the person sending it or receiving it?
Okay, so it's free to send and receive Bitcoin. The only cost to send and receive, it's pretty much free to send and receive Bitcoin. The only cost is about 3 US cents, which gets paid to the miners. And that's another conversation, but they are the people who verify that our transaction is legitimate. They're part of the community, the online community. What then happens is, to buy Bitcoin, it will cost me anything from 0.1% to 0.5%. And to sell Bitcoin into another currency will cost me anything from 0.1 to 0.5%. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the whole thing cost 1%. It's still a hell of a lot cheaper and faster than using traditional banking.
Okay. And of course, the receiving banks, if they were sending it to, because you've got different banks from all over the world. If you're not sending from the same bank in Thailand to the same bank in America, which is probably unlikely anyway, then there's going to be costs which would be potentially higher than what would be for Bitcoin.
A lot higher. So to remit money using a bank or a money mover like Western Union can cost you anything from 3% to 10%. But Bitcoin is pretty much free to send and receive. So when I say pretty much free, I'm trying to distinguish between, if I just send you Bitcoin, it's going to cost us 3 cents, which in this day and age is essentially free. If I want to transfer US dollar into Bitcoin, that's going to cost me 0.1%, for example. And then for you to get Bitcoin to US dollar again on the other end is going to cost you 0.1%. So hopefully that's a problem we don't have in the future, because hopefully in the future people want to hold on to Bitcoin when the price stabilizes, when there's more liquidity in the market and there is more things that you can buy. Like you can go to the supermarket and pay in Bitcoin. So at the moment you can pay for your hotels on Expedia.com in Bitcoin. You can buy software from Microsoft in Bitcoin. So hopefully in the future you can buy your groceries in Bitcoin, you can pay your tax in Bitcoin, and then there's not really any need for people to move in and out of US dollar anymore. They just keep Bitcoin. And at that point it's going to be very, very interesting, because for me to send you Bitcoin and you to receive Bitcoin is pretty much free.
Well, it sounds like it's in its infancy, and for people who have a sort of adventurous spirit, now may be the time to get in on the ground floor. How does it work with your company? What are the processes? If people are watching this and go, yeah, I want to find out a little bit more. I mean, we've got your website on the screen as we're talking, but what's the sort of next step for them?
Okay, so we're launching privately in January. So if you go to our website now, you can basically sign up for an early access invitation. What that means is you just go to our site, Cryptosigma.com, enter your email address, and then in January, when we launch into what we call private testing, private beta, we will send you an invitation to set up an account. And then you can use the account. We'll give you $10 free credit when you sign up, and you can buy some Bitcoin, you can experiment, you can send some Bitcoin. If you don't know anyone with a Bitcoin wallet, you can send it to a charity. There's lots of charities who accept Bitcoin. And And yeah, you can basically start to use Bitcoin. You can start to get familiar with how it feels to have a Bitcoin wallet and to store value on your smartphone or on your computer. So it's really easy. When you sign up, we don't need any KYC really for you to send and receive Bitcoin. But once you want to start sending us US dollar or Thai baht so you can buy Bitcoin, we need to do KYC. That's part of the regulation that we have to comply with. So we need proof of address. So that's a bank statement or a tax document or an electricity bill. And we also need your passport or ID. And yeah, we keep that data obviously completely private. It's just part of our KYC, which is Know Your Customer process, just to make sure that we don't have any nefarious individuals coming in and using our system to send and receive money to do things that would would be frowned upon, shall we say.
All right. Well, I think you've given us a fairly good roundup. It was a very good presentation today, and it was interesting. You were telling a lot of the history about money and about gold and various other aspects, which was of great interest. Fortunately, we can't cover them all here on TV. What did you think about the feedback and the questions that you got from the members today?
Yeah, really, really great questions. And for me, it's a slightly older demographic here at the Pattaya City Expats Club. And that's really, really something that I was looking forward to, because the kind of questions that come from this demographic are completely different to the kind of questions that come from perhaps a younger demographic. And so that's really great for me. I really love that. It helps me understand what it is we're trying to do better, how people interpret it, because the way I understand things and see Bitcoin and Bitcoin exchange and wallet services, etc., is not the same way some other people see it. So the more insight I have, the better.
Okay. Well, it's very interesting actually meeting you, and you talk about these wallets. My uncle was the senior vice president for MasterCard, and I remember 20 years ago they were talking about the electronic wallet, and it never happened.
Exactly. Why it never happened? So basically, 20 years ago, there was a guy called David Chaum, and he had a company called DigiCash. And it was kind of before we started to use credit cards and debit cards, etc. And it was a point in time where it was either going to be we were going to use DigiCash and electronic money, or we were going to use credit cards. And David Chaum was trying to do a deal with Microsoft, and I think they offered him $90 million. And they said, right, we are going to include a copy of DigiCash on every Windows machine that we ship. And he said, well, I also want $3 for every piece of software, Windows software, that gets installed with DigiCash on it. And they said no, and the deal fell apart, and then there were some other things that happened, and so we ended up with credit cards. Right. Yeah, but David Chaum was somebody who was really ahead of the game. I'm really surprised to hear you say that, but yeah, 20 years ago, we were supposed to have digital wallets. Yeah, sure.
Well, there you go. So maybe it's time for people to open their eyes a little bit and take in these new sort of technologies and these new way of being able to either invest your money, transact your money. And as you said, it's like all terms of investment, the best way is to have a diverse portfolio, isn't it?
I agree, yeah. I think the best way is to have a diverse portfolio. And I think in terms of using Bitcoin, I think what people have to remember is, in 2014, we can have a video call with somebody on the other side of the world on our mobile phones, but it still takes 3 to 5 days to send money. So ask yourself some questions about why that is.
Yeah. Sounds mad, doesn't it?
It's a bit crazy.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to wind up here today and for 2014, but we will be back here every Sunday, and you should come along as well. You get to meet interesting people like Aaron and the many other guest speakers that they will have coming up in the new year. The list of the next guest speakers will be coming up in our closing titles. So see you down here every Sunday morning. It starts about 10:30 with the guest speakers, but come along about 9:30, have a coffee, have some breakfast, and get to meet some of the other expats who've been living here for a while, hear some of their stories and some of their experiences. This is Paul and Aaron saying goodbye and Happy New Year. Thank you.